Welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. I'm John,
I'm Jack.
and this is our inaugural episode. And Jack, you chose one heck of a film to start us off. It was so upbeat.
Yeah, I figured we'd start out on a happy note, just to celebrate the good times in life. Just kidding. It was very horrific.
I mean, nothing says like a grand time like a nuclear holocaust.
Yep. I really thought I'd bring this podcast in with a bang. Yes, the pun was intended.
That's honestly kind of terrible.
Yeah, I know. I'm an awful person. I'm going to get this podcast canceled in the first 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, we won't have to put that much work into it then, I guess. So where did you even find this? Because I'd never heard of Picadon, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, but I'd never heard of it before you sent it to me.
I'm glad you asked. I was on Reddit, and I'm trying to find the post right now, actually.
Yes, Reddit, the source of all great internet content.
Here it is. And it was on the morbid reality subreddit because I'm just a little ghoul like that. And one of the posts I came across was the survivors' sketches and paintings detailing the experiences of a man who survived the Hiroshima bombings. And they're about as upbeat as this film, which is to say not at all. They're very, very visceral. And I actually read about this movie in those comments, and somebody linked it to YouTube. And I was like, the entire movie is only 8 minutes. So then I watched it, and then I'm like, what the heck? Who would love this? And by love it, I mean probably hate it. My good buddy DP. And, I sent it to you thinking that it would be good with our podcast, and here we are. Where are you?
I was honestly shocked, for only being 8 minutes, there's so much that's just packed into it. Like, I watched it like probably 5 or 6 times this past week, and every time I watched it, like I kept coming across something new or like something kind of just stuck with me. And I mean, for being an 8-minute film, it's definitely, it's not a walk in the park to watch. I mean, a nuclear bombing probably shouldn't be easy to watch, but the beginning of this film is so deceptively calm and soothing. And I mean, the best example of that is when you first sent it to me. Like, I had no idea what it was about, and I was only kind of halfway paying attention to it. And for like the first 2 minutes, I'm like, why am I watching this? Because it's just this like super peaceful piano rendition and like happy families and like a kid throwing a paper airplane. And then you hear the engine noise of like the bombers coming overhead. And then I'm like, oh, wait, this is going to be shitty.
Yeah.
And then the next 6 minutes of the film is just absolutely horrendous. Yeah.
Horrendous in a good way. Very provocative, like true art should be. And for those listening, I watched it together with him the first time he watched it, and we were in Discord. And I even heard the moment where he said, wait a minute, is this about Hiroshima? And like, there was really no other response other than, what took you so long? Like, it's peaceful cityscapes of a Japanese city. There's only one thing it could be.
Incorrect. Japan, I hear, is a wonderful place. I haven't been, but I was like, okay, peaceful Japanese city, what could this be? And I didn't pick up on, the initial, like, the one, like, dad character, like, putting on his uniform and getting ready to, like, go into work one day. I literally, it was when the airplane noise came in that I'm like, wait a minute, is this Hiroshima? And then like it cuts to like a scene of like a tank factory, and like you see like supply trucks rolling by, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible.
Yep.
But I I looked this film up using the greatest research tool of all time, Wikipedia, and
Hmm.
it's such a scant Wikipedia entry.
Yeah, I have it up right now, actually.
Like even the Wikipedia entry is like, this is an obscure film, and I'm like, I wonder why. Like, but the thing that struck me even more than that is the fact that, obviously there's no citation to it, but it said it's used as like an educational tool in like the Japanese school system.
Yeah, but that part isn't cited by. It even says by whom, but
Right. But I would have to imagine that there's at least one or two teachers in the Japanese school system who probably shows this film.
it, if I recall correctly, they show a barefoot Gen, another one of my what's the word, submissions for this podcast. I know they show barefoot Gen in some schools, so it stands to reason that they'd show this one.
I I got I went down this pretty deep rabbit hole of the Japanese education system as far as when it comes to teaching history. And I was quite frankly shocked at like how much revisionism goes on with it.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you look at our other adversary of World War II, Nazi Germany, um, we kind of steamrolled over their entire country and made them not a thing anymore. And in the German education system, they put a very high premium on teaching every single person like this is the shitty thing we did and we can't have it repeat. And there's laws on the book in Germany about like being a Holocaust denier is illegal,
Mm-hmm.
or saying the Holocaust didn't happen is illegal. But Japan being different, obviously we dropped the atomic bombs on them. And because we dropped the atomic bombs on them, we never invaded the home islands. So there
Yeah.
wasn't that same, like, we're scraping the country to the ground kind of effect. Um, and if you look at, like, Germany had the Nuremberg trials. Well, we had a set of, what was it called? Um, like a war crime tribunal in Japan also. But like a good chunk of those guys never got punished. They were let off, and they actually like held a position in the government that was reformed after the war.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a bunch of guys who are a little butthurt about losing the war, and Asian cultures have kind of a big thing about image, or the like saving face type deal.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because it's pervasive even today. So do you remember the prime minister of Japan that was assassinated not too long ago, Shinzo Abe?
Shinzo Abe. Yeah.
Yeah, so he came out with like a public statement about it was an apology of sorts, and it nearly tanked his political career. And he
That
had to
bad,
like
huh?
yeah, he had to like walk back what he said in order to keep his position.
Ooh.
So I mean, it's an interesting situation. And the other part of what I was looking up about it was there was, looking up the education system, there was one teacher from Japan that did like a Quora, like answering question type deal, or
Oh
some sort of
yeah,
interview.
Cora.
And this teacher was like, yeah, we have a 400-page textbook on Japanese history, and approximately like 15 pages are World War II.
I have heard that.
And the thing is like, it's usually at the tail end of their like educational semester, year, what have you. And a lot of times they either like don't make it to it, or it's super rushed. And it's like super horrible events like the rape of Nanking is like a footnote.
Yeah, I have heard about that. About the revisionism and the censorship. Yeah, that's the right word.
There was I came across a quote by Stephen E. Ambrose, who he wrote the book Band of Brothers as well as a bunch of other books, and he had a quote that summed up his view of like the way the Japanese teach World War II history, and it's like everything was peaceful, and then one day the Americans dropped a bomb on us, which I know is grossly oversimplified, but I'm like it kind of there's it strikes a little true, just in the way that they go about the current telling of World War II in Japan. At least that's the way it seems. I've obviously never taken a Japanese high school class.
Man, yeah, it's something. But getting back to Picadon, how old is this movie?
I think it was released in 78.
Yeah, 78.
And what I will say is that for an animated film released in 78, it seems kind of on par. Like the first thing that I noticed about the animation style about it, I was like, man, this kind of looks like the OG Hobbit film.
Like, I was going to bring that up. How do you even describe this animation style? Like watercolors? Almost?
Yeah, almost. That is literally the only thing I could correlate it to in my brain was it gave me the vibe of like the original Hobbit animated film.
Yeah, Rolf Bakshi. That's the guy who did those iconic animations.
But like when I tried looking up the director for this film, and maybe it's because I'm terrible at researching, but I couldn't find any other titles that was attributed to this person. But apparently they had been involved in animation since like the 60s, and also apparently created the Hiroshima Animated Film Festival, which I was not aware was a thing.
Me neither.
I'm curious if it's still active. I'm sure it probably is, but I'm interested to think about what kind of submissions are usually sent to it.
Yeah. Oh man, I wonder if they're as provocative as this one. I bet they are. Yeah. Renzo Kinoshita. I couldn't find anything much else on him either. He died in 97 by the sounds of it.
Well, he definitely, even though this is an obscure film, he's definitely left a significant impression.
Mm-hmm. And
like going with this particular film, when I was on vacation a couple of weeks ago, I brought Hiroshima by John Hersey with me, because what better way to spend your vacation than to read about an atomic bombing.
Yep, relaxing.
I wanted to have like a compare and contrast of like what actual survivors said versus like what is depicted from this film. And the part where you have people like stuck in the rubble is what really kind of like piqued my interest, or kind of like grabbed my attention. The absolute worst thing, and it's a personal pet peeve, especially like ever since I finished my EMT stuff years ago, was there's a scene where you have a person who's like buried underneath the rubble, and like you just see them reaching out with their hand, and someone tries to like lift them out of the rubble. Oh. And it is immediately a degloving, which for our listeners, if you don't know what a degloving is, I highly don't recommend you Google that. Imagine that your skin is a glove, but you're taking the glove off.
Yep. It's just bone, like no no meat underneath, just clean off.
Yeah, the the thing that didn't resonate with me but kind of threw me out of it actually was the initial parts where like people are melting. And like I get that that's supposed to demonstrate the power of the bomb and like the intensity of it, but I feel like everything that you ever see or hear about is that it's more of like an incineration versus this is like, oh, I get the feeling that this is like somebody jumped into a giant like stew pot.
Yeah, like do you know exactly how hot the explosion was? Because
It was like 5,000 degrees Celsius, which my American brain cannot translate that into Fahrenheit.
yeah, it's hot, like surface of the sun.
Well, yeah, there's an exhibit um, where there's like a section of cement or concrete sidewalk that they removed that was approximately like 20 or 50 feet from the epicenter of the blast, and it's literally just like a shadow on the ground, and they claim that this was a person. Like I have no doubt that it probably is or was, but also it's like it's hard to comprehend somebody going from like a walking talking human being to a literal shadow.
Yeah, and I've seen those pictures too, where it's just imprinted on the side of a building.
I think it does get shown in this film, obviously with like the buildings falling over and like people like starting at one side of the frame and then they like you see their hair like
Blown back.
blown back and then they go to the other side of the frame. I feel like if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the casualties from Hiroshima initially was kind of more of like a pressure blast.
Pressure blast. Huh. And yeah, the scene of them getting back up again after they got blasted and the skin is just hanging off of them.
Yeah, that was another interesting thing that like I was reading about looking into this. It was weird to think about the fact that people who were most likely to survive the blast were people who had been buried in rubble. And it's kind of a weird reason, but the like go-to method of trying to comfort or treat these people in the immediate aftermath of this was to give them water. Like that's a pretty common thing for any kind of traumatic experience. It's like, oh, have a sip of water, or like get hydrated, all that stuff. But like when you're dealing with an extreme amount of radiation poisoning, like it just your insides are just so toast that it can't handle the introduction of water and it kills you. Versus the people who were stuck in the rubble for a couple of days, like yeah, they still had massive amounts of radiation exposure, but like their body got to like resettle, so to speak.
Yeah.
So what was the like the most striking scene or image in this film for you?
The part after the explosion, all those people just sitting by the river, and it's like garishly red and pink, and I have it pulled up right now actually, and then the sky is just this reddish orange, and there's bodies in the water just draped along the riverbanks everywhere, because likely they got burned by the initial explosion and went to the water.
Is that also is that scene like
Yeah,
right next to the scene where there's like kind of like a mountain of people?
it's kind of by that. It's 5 minutes and 55-ish seconds in, and then it's the one of that dude bumbling through the smoke and the soot, trying to find his way. And like, this is kind of going to sound weird to say, but if we were hit by a nuclear bomb, God forbid, we'd at least know what was going on. These guys had no context as to what just happened and what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is the first time that a weapon of this sort was ever used. So it's very hard to wrap your head around it. And like at the time, the only people who had even the faintest idea of what was going on were like Japanese scientists, because they're like, hey, this looks surprisingly a lot like stuff we were trying to make. Like,
how far along did they get in their nuclear programs? I know that they were working on it.
I don't know. I think the Germans got farther along in their nuclear program, but they faced a lot of at least the Germans did, a lot of setbacks because of like sabotage and commando raids and stuff.
That's right, the heavy water plant in Norway.
Yeah,
was it?
that was like a huge resource that they got out of that country. But it's interesting to think that, you know, obviously they didn't have a means of comprehending like what exactly this giant tremendous weapon was. But like prior to the bombings, the US did drop leaflets over a bunch of different cities saying, you know, we're in possession of the greatest weapon known to mankind. They neglected to drop those leaflets on Hiroshima. But they did it to like a dozen other cities. But at this time in the war, the US had already leveled like 20 or 30 cities. And when I say level, I mean just like yeah, absolutely, completely leveled straight to the ground. So if you're a person who's living in a city that hasn't been destroyed yet and you're reading the newspapers like, oh, Tokyo was firebombed into oblivion and now they're dropping a leaflet saying we have the greatest weapon known to mankind, it's like, what difference does that make? Like, you already completely destroy our cities. Like,
yeah, and context is hard. It's hard to explain just what a nuclear bomb is to people that don't have the knowledge that we do today.
But also, there's something to be said about like in wartime, like if we were in a wartime environment and like there are leaflets that were dropped on our city from like Russia or something that said we are in possession of a secret weapon that could end you in a second, and you know, leave the context out of their nuclear arsenal, like you would 100%, like us as Americans, we'd be like, okay, Russia, like whatever, like
Yeah,
like go fuck yourself. Like it's like, I have a girlfriend, she just goes to a different school. Like
yeah, we think they're trying to get in our heads.
Yeah, it's like, as much as I'm sure they probably wanted people to take those leaflets seriously, I can't imagine anybody is like, yeah, they're totally going to believe this.
What did I've heard it before, yeah, but I don't really see a lot of people mentioning the leaflets that were dropped when they're talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Do you know how many were dropped and what became of them?
I don't know how many were dropped. I do know that the Japanese government had a pretty negative reaction to it, like police rounding people up if they were found in possession of the leaflets type deal. So, but I feel as though that's a typical like totalitarian government type move.
Yep. And you think they like or was it contraband to have those leaflets? Did they just say like, hey, we got a bunch of leaflets dropped on us, turn them in and we'll burn them or something?
To that I don't know. I think it was probably like, oh, this guy has this leaflet in his pocket, like let's arrest him type situation. But I imagine wartime Imperial Japan was probably not like the friendliest place in the
Oh
world.
God, no. Yeah. And I don't know much, I guess, about Imperial Japan and what it was like to live during that time, but I can't imagine it was sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah. You know, I think there's a guy on YouTube I follow. His name is, or his YouTube channel is called Japan at War, and he literally covers all topics Japanese military. I feel like if we ever have another Japan film come up, that we should try and get somebody like him on here to educate us idiots.
And I think I did put in a submission for Barefoot Gen. It's very similar to this, where it's about the Hiroshima bombing, but it's way longer. It's more in depth.
I do believe it's on the list, but I think we also have like The Last Samurai on the list, and several Pacific War films have made their way on the list also. I've been continuously adding to it the past like week or two, and I think we're close to 100 films now.
Damn.
Yeah, it's just like it's kind of like pulling a string. It just one after the other, especially when you go to like the IMDb page. It's like you might like this also. I'm like, I've never heard of that.
Put it in the basket.
It was like I was looking up a list of like John Wayne war movies because I'm like, well, there's got to be like a solid 20 or 30 entries we can tack onto the list there. But one of the suggested films was a film called She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, which is apparently about like the Indian Wars. Ooh. And it features like a 50 or 60-year-old John Wayne as a aging cavalry officer.
Ooh. I thought you were gonna say you added that movie where he plays Genghis Khan to the list, and I was about to leave.
Well, I mean, it could be war adjacent. He did die due to radiation poisoning due to that.
That's film. Right. I think I heard something about that. I didn't know if it was true though.
No, yeah. The film site for what was it called again? I just know it as the John Wayne Genghis Khan film.
The film site?
No, the actual name of the movie.
I want to say it's The Conqueror, but
that does sound right. Yeah, the film site for The Conqueror was like immediately adjacent to one of the like nuclear bomb test sites in New Mexico or Nevada.
Oh.
And like something like over half of the cast and crew ended up getting diagnosed with cancer within like 2 or 3 years of that film being finished.
Interesting. So that's the film we have to blame for John Wayne dying.
I mean, it might have played a part. I can't imagine his daily diet of like 3 T-bone steaks or whatever the fuck it was he ate.
Yeah, and getting blackout drunk every night and like smoking 3 packs a day.
You know who else smoked 3 packs a day?
If you say my mom.
No, no. Does she? Oh, okay. Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Ah.
At the time of the Normandy invasion, he was clocked at being a 3-pack a day guy.
Wow. I guess the stress of war.
Which, to be fair, being in charge of something that, you know,
daunting,
big and important. Yeah, you can't really blame him for needing a little nicotine reprieve.
Yeah, an entire theater of war right on his back.
But I think, if I'm not mistaken, at some point I think it was like when he ran for president was about the time he quit smoking. Which seems like that seems like a very odd time to choose to quit smoking, because, you know, he was president at the height of the the Cold War, and it's like you're on the verge of a nuclear Armageddon every single day, and that's when you decide, you know what, I'm going to lay off the Pall Malls.
Yeah, just rein it in a bit. What was his brand?
You know, that's a great question. I will have to look that up, and I'll have that as that can be our bit of maybe we can have like a trivia question every episode where we'll have a question where we don't know the answer to it, and whoever actually listens to this can try and provide the answer to us.
That'd be great.
So yeah, the listeners, the question of the week is, what brand of cigarettes did Dwight D. Eisenhower smoke?
If you answer correctly, we'll get you a pack of steak knives. Except we won't. We'll just be slightly smarter and we'll thank you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if we actually get branded kind of stuff, we can get you a sticker or something.
Man, can you imagine being sponsored?
Maybe that should be another part of our daily episode, is shouting out a company that we're not sponsored by but would love to be sponsored by.
Gaslight them into sponsoring us. Genius.
So hey, Lucky Strike.
Also, what are you drinking?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. I decided to go with something very on brand or appropriate for the topic of today. So I'm drinking Suntory whiskey, which is a whiskey produced in Japan.
And also our sponsor for today's video.
We're not sponsored by Suntory whiskey,
but we could be.
But we could be if you're not completely offended by our take on the Hiroshima bombing. So yeah, Suntory whiskey, reach out. I'd be more than happy to take your money. I mean, I genuinely like your product if that helps.
And me.
See, you already got one free ad placement from us.
Yeah, and me and my Bud Light.
You're saying you didn't hop on the destroying of Bud Light can train?
No, I didn't.
Good for you. A man of principle who sticks by his shitty beer choices.
Yeah. What is a man if not the sum of his principles and convictions?
As well as his pocketbook for what he can afford in beer.
And his money. And his money, indeed. I mean, anyone who thinks they're too good for a good old cheap beer hasn't done enough blue-collar labor in their life, and that's just my opinion.
I find that whole thing kind of ridiculous. Like, really, people, you're offended that Bud Light picked up a sponsor or somebody to hawk their product. Like, their literal goal in life as a business is to sell their product to as many people as possible. So they're not going to turn their blind eye to an entire what's the word I'm looking for? Demographic of people.
Mm-hmm. It's just dumb. This whole gay beer controversy.
I'm not sure what that has to do with a nuclear holocaust, but
man, we kind of got off topic there.
But at least the people who are listening know that we are not anti-gay beer.
Absolutely not.
I am an equal opportunist beer drinker.
Absolutely, and as am I. Man, this guy.
So, we'll continue with what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, just back to the director. I can't find anything on him. And the screenplay, the producers, the cinematographer, the music.
I will say obviously music plays such a huge part in the way that we digest a film. Mm-hmm. But like the music in this short film was doing some overtime work. Like it had to do so much effort to bring you from like, I'm happy, this is great being in Japan, everything's peaceful, to, oh my fucking God, to everything's okay again.
Yeah, just apocalypse. And it was bittersweet, for lack of a better term, the final shot of that paper airplane that kid threw flying over the now modernized Hiroshima. Really a message about rebuilding.
something Phoenix from the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
Something.
Very unrelated fun fact, but do you know the city Atlanta's symbol or sigil? One of those two.
The city of Atlanta symbol?
Yeah, like the symbol of the city of Atlanta, Georgia.
No, what is it?
It's a phoenix because it's the only major U.S. city that's been completely decimated by war.
Huh.
After it got burned down in the Civil War. The more
Not
you know.
a minute too soon if you don't ask me.
Ooh, may have isolated.
Down with the traitors.
May have isolated our southern demographic for listeners.
Well, when they stop waving the white flag of surrender, then they can have an opinion.
Ooh. Dunked on.
Another fun fact of the evening: one of the hosts here is vehemently pro-union and anti-Confederacy. So,
yeah,
you can look forward to that if we get a Civil War film coming up.
I know Glory's on our list.
Yeah, there's a couple of Civil War films, so I can't imagine it'd take too terribly long for us to get around to one. So I feel like we should do some sort of rating. Like, I don't know if 5 stars works, or if we should do like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or like what kind of metric do you think we should use for?
I'm not comfortable giving a rating to this movie other than a definite recommendation. Watch it, darn it.
We suggest that watching the film is worthwhile. Maybe in the next film or two, we'll have a rating system of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
You sure you don't want to do like 5 mushroom clouds or something?
Ooh, God damn it. But no, doesn't it feel weird rating war movies, though, on a certain level?
Yes, to a degree, I would agree with that. But also, I feel like rating of like Rotten Tomatoes made an entire business model out of it.
Yeah, but they do other movies, so that makes it okay.
But they don't neglect the war movies in their tomato meter.
The thermometer. Oh my god. Yeah, that
maybe that should be our metric, is when we do a film, we look at the thermometer and then we say whether or not we agree with it.
Yeah, we should do that, because man, the thermometer has misguided me before. There are films that are like 15% on the thermometer that I love, and then there are also movies that are 93 that I hate.
And yeah, it's definitely a bit skewed.
Oh, absolutely. And I've noticed that it's getting worse in that regard, that there's movies that are coveted and loved by the general movie-going proletariat, but then they're hated by the critics and vice versa.
All right, so I think that's a good. Does this film have a thermometer reading?
Oh, right. I was going to search that.
I wouldn't be shocked if there isn't one. This is the part where I'll put in like Jeopardy music.
Wait. I'm looking, but nothing's coming up. There's a film review from 2010. Oh, there's an IMDb for it. It is 7.7 out of 10 from Internet Movie Database.
7.7 out of 10. I think out of 10 on the IMDb rating, this should at least be an 8. My only there's 2 things that bring it down for me. One is the certain, like, obviously this was meant to be a shock to the conscience, but there are some things that seemed a little gratuitous, kind of like the I can't believe we never even got around to it, but the mother who was like breastfeeding, who started melting away.
Yeah, and that covered her child.
Like, I think you can show something absolutely horrible, like the death of a mother and her child, but like the melting thing kind of threw me out of it for a moment. And then the other part of it too is just because of the current resources of how it's saved. Like, if you go to YouTube right now and look up this film, you're going to it looks like somebody transferred a VHS tape to DVD, and then just the transferring process did not fully capture what I think this film originally was.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
But
think I know
I
what you're
definitely think
talking
it's
about.
more than a 7.7 or a 7.8. I think it's a solid 8.0 for me.
I agree. Yeah, like that's that seems like a fair rating for it. 7.7 seems kind of harsh. But so I was reading the Internet Movie Database and the summary. The flash of the A bomb, 100 times brighter than the sun, is called Pica, Pica, and the enormous shock wave which came right after the flash is called Dawn, hence Picadon, flash and boom.
I was not expecting a language lesson today, but I'm grateful for it.
The
Do you
more
think
you
I
know.
can add that to my my Babbel like daily check-in?
Yes.
It's too bad because I have German selected for my current Babbel subscription, which also we're not sponsored by Babbel or Duolingo, but be more than happy to take your money to hawk your product. Because
Yep.
you use Duolingo,
More than
right?
happy.
See, it's
I
perfect,
do.
guys.
Spanish.
Either one of us, give us dollars, please.
Please.
How else am I supposed to buy some sort of relevant alcoholic beverage for our next episode?
What is
The
our next episode?
Because this was our first one and we wanted to keep it short, which congratulations, we're coming up on like 45 minutes to an hour for this one. Just for a trial run, but our next episode was going to be, it was your choice of Come and See.
Wait, I thought we were going to do your choice.
I know our plan was for us to go every other, but I thought we were starting with Come and See, and then we were going to do one of mine after that. I mean,
okay.
I have no problem pulling up the list right now and picking something for myself, but I don't want to deprive you of your selection.
I mean, all right. I heard Come and See is very heavy. I haven't actually seen it yet.
So what do you know about it? Like, just as
Eastern Front, World War II, Bulgaria, I believe.
Just as a general synopsis for anybody who actually decides to come back.
After finding an old rifle, a young boy joins the Soviet resistance movement against ruthless German forces and experiences the horrors of World War II.
That also sounds like a super stellar and fun film with...
Very.
Why do I have a feeling we're going to see children die in our next film?
No, they wouldn't do that.
Wouldn't they?
It's against the rules.
Though?
Yes, absolutely they would.
All right, so next film is Come and See, about the Eastern Front. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
Thank you for coming and listening to us talk for about 45 minutes. This recording on its own is like, 5 times longer than the entire Picadon movie itself?
About that. I don't think we can manage that pace for like a 2-hour movie, but...
Yeah, no. 10 hours. Yep. You heard it here, folks. The next episode's going to
I
be
think
10
we're
hours
definitely
long.
just going to have to spark note the next episode. Hit the highlights, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Well, I
Yep.
greatly appreciate everybody who stopped by and listened to our show, and hopefully we catch you on the next episode. Until then, I've been John.
And I'm Jack.
And we'll catch you next week.
Bye.